And we're up now. Yes, I can tell. I just realized that. But to actually Hello and welcome to another Melbourne AWS user group. We are up to episode, I think, 96 now, and our second under hard lockdown, but we've been doing this for a little while now, so I think everybody knows how this works. So we'll just kick straight into the slides. I go this way, not that way. Our agenda for tonight, we have regular contributor Dawn is back for another look at ProductCorp. This time the CFO wants to see what they can do to cut their bills down, so this is going to be a really interesting look. Up after that, we have Anshu, who's going to take us quickly through a pre-recorded presentation he gave around ultra-low latency live streaming. So actually very interested in this one because obviously it's applicable to the work that we're doing here right now. Immediately after that, and wrapping up for the night, we'll have Peter, who's going to take us through setting up the AWS client VPN, another very useful thing in this age of 2020. And then we'll wrap up, and there will be a post-stream Zoom, as we've done for the last few months. And of course, there we go. Hang on. Doing this thing again. That's better. We encourage you to ask questions. Ask lots of questions because interactivity is important. You can ask those questions in Slack, on Twitter if you prefer, or in the chat on YouTube where you're watching this right now. After the presentations, myself or Arjen will jump on the stream with the presenter and ask those questions on your behalf. And we also appreciate any comments or feedback that you have. We will include those in the live stream if they're good. So as always, we can't do these things without our sponsors. So a huge thanks to Enabler, our gold sponsor for 2020. And our silver sponsors, AC3, CMD, and Do It International. Big thanks to all of those guys. So a quick look at who are we. One of the big questions we always get asked is what we do at Amazon, but Arjen and I do not work for AWS. We're part of members of this community, the same as everybody else. And as always, this place is run by volunteers. Is that my next slide? Probably not, actually. But you can reach out to Arjen or I on Slack or on Twitter. We're always available to chat. Speaking of Slack, we have one of the most active Slack communities related to AWS in Australia, which is not really saying a lot. That's a pretty low bar, but you can always ask questions during the day, get some help with stuff, talk about announcements, post for jobs, outages, that sort of thing. And we encourage you to get involved in any way that you feel you can. We're always on the lookout for speakers, particularly so during 2020. Finding speakers has been the most difficult thing about moving to the lockdown situation. It's certainly a lot harder than finding them to speak at a physical presentation sort of thing. But we encourage all presenters on any topic vaguely related to AWS. Doesn't have to be a long presentation. It can be a short presentation. It could be anything you want to talk about. Our sponsorship roster is closed for 2020. We will probably open it up again in the next month or two for 2021. But we're always looking for volunteers as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff with video editing and the website and all of that sort of stuff that we could really use some help with. So a quick look at what else is on that you might be interested in attending. The Melbourne AI Developers Group is looking at object detection with AWS DeepLens and SageMaker this month. Next month? Next month. It sounds eerily familiar to a presentation that we had at our user group a couple of years back from Chris, but I'm sure that it's been updated since then. Definitely worth checking it out if you haven't had a chance to play with DeepLens and SageMaker before. We also have the Multi-Cloud Engineering Group, which is hosted by one of our sponsors, Do It International. This time, they're part of the Yao Auckland series. They're doing something on microservices special. So definitely worth checking that out as well. I think that was my last slide. Yep. So this part of the evening, I usually throw over to Ian and friends. This month, we have Guy Morton is back with us again. So we'll bring over to them and they can tell you what's been happening in the world of AWS for the last month.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to What's New in AWS again.
Yep. Hi, everyone.
So let's just get into it because it's been a busy month again. And we'll start with finally in Sydney. This month we had not one, not two, but 3 new heroes. So in order of their appearances at this meetup, we have everybody's favorite code terrorist, Ian Mackay, Peter Hansens, who is joining us today, as Rob already said, so we get to see him, which is great, and Mike Chambers as a machine learning expert. Unfortunately, we haven't had him present here yet. I'm sure that's something we'll work on.
Round of applause. Woo!
So the other things that came to Sydney were all instance related. We got the new Graviton processors. These are the ARM processors, the second generation ARM processors from Amazon, so the M6G, C6G, and R6G, and the Inferentia processor for better, faster machine learning tasks.
Yeah. So the nice thing about this, I guess, is now that those instance types are in Sydney, we should see some RDS instances powered by those things in Sydney soon too, I guess. The Graviton processors.
That would also be good. Well, let's look at serverless. So on the serverless side, couple of interesting things. Lambda custom runtimes are now all available on Amazon Linux too, even though obviously we shouldn't think about what it's running on. It is still important. Especially if you're running, so you might want to check out the blog post and documentation to see which runtimes you need to select for this, especially for Go, as you're now, as it's now built into the base Amazon Linux 2 image.
Yeah, the new HTTP API gateway integration is quite nice too. So there's integrations now with app config, event bridge, Kinesis data streams, SQS and step functions. So that's a nice handy way of being able to invoke some AWS services through HTTP APIs too.
Yeah, this is basically catching up with the REST APIs.
Yep.
As is the wildcard custom domains, but it's good to see that we're getting the missing features from the REST API now into the HTTP API, which, for those of you who don't remember, is a lower cost and possibly faster API gateway, as you don't have as much overhead as with the full REST API.
And the step functions, I've been spending some time with step functions recently, so the enhancements there look quite nice. A bit more functionality in the choice and task states, so you can there's more operators for testing values and comparing values, and so that'll be quite handy if you're into step functions. Have a look at that.
Yep. Let's have a quick look at some containers thing. So the big one here possibly is the AWS controllers for Kubernetes. So what this allows you to do is deploy your infrastructure from your Kubernetes cluster. This is based on an open source project from Amazon employee, and they adopted it and turned it into something bigger. think at the moment it's still pretty limited what you can spin up, but they announced plans for certain things like RDS and even EKS clusters themselves. So you can start your EKS clusters from your EKS. Whether or not it's useful for you, that's something you'll have to figure out. So obviously, on a cost savings perspective, having Fargate on EKS in the savings plan is good. But another one that is interesting now for us in Sydney is that you can now run, or that you can now use the Graviton processors that were just released in Sydney for EKS. So that might have some savings there as well. And similarly, lucky for us, ECS now supports the Inferentia instances. So it's nice that we get both of those.
Yep.
Other things here, managed node group supporting custom AMIs is pretty big, because that's something that was very much missing. So a lot of good stuff for containers. On the DevOps side then?
Yep. So the code build parallel coordinated execution thing, that's one. I think we touched on it in the podcast, if I'm correct.
We did.
Yeah, and because it was relevant, because I just spent a bit of time building a step functions state machine for doing multiple parallel deployments from multiple pipelines, and so this is kind of another way, I guess, of solving a similar sort of problem. So you can use a configuration list or a config matrix or a dependency graph to build to define your build needs, and code build can do basically run multiple builds in parallel according to those instructions. So it's called a batch build. So that's all new and interesting and good.
It is. Talking of another code thing is Code Guru. The full repository analysis basically means that now the first time when you onboard your repository on Code Guru, you can run the analysis over the whole repository instead of only the pull requests.
Yeah, there's a couple of use cases for that I thought were interesting. That's obviously one, on onboarding it, and due diligence. So if you're taking on if you're looking at taking on a project, you could run it as a sort of a check to find out where all the bodies are buried, I guess, before you decide whether you want to take it on or not. So that's another potential use case for it.
Yep. Cool. Let's quick look at some security items then.
So yeah, the nice one here I think probably is the GuardDuty S3 protection based on Macie. So they reduced the price of Macie quite a bit a few months ago, and now the functionality of Macie has been incorporated into GuardDuty as well. So that's a nice enhancement for the GuardDuty platform, I guess. You could just about call it these days. So what it'll do is continuously monitor for data access events and also for configuration events and detect suspicious activities. So that's a nice thing to have built into GuardDuty without having to go and enable the full Macie product.
Yeah. Speaking of expensive services like Macie, another potentially nice one here is the Certificate Manager Private Certificate Authority, which has a name that really rolls off the tongue. So this is for if you want to have your own private certificates. So think SSL certificates. Now you pay a monthly fee for these authorities, and in addition to that, a per call fee. But now you can finally share this across accounts so that you can, if you are a bigger company or you just in general have a lot of different AWS accounts to separate your workloads, you can now use a single authority instead of needing to manage many of them and paying for that management fee for them.
Very cool.
Yep. So some other cool stuff that came out. I think possibly one of the big ones here is the new EBS volumes.
Yeah. Yeah. So yep. Johnson stats, 99.999% durability. So 2,000 times more reliable than a commodity disk drive. So yeah. So the big things are higher durability and more IOPS. Are the main differences.
Yep, and that's all for the same price as the old IO1 volumes.
Yep, and the only thing that you can't do with IoT volumes is do multi-attach. The that thing where you can attach volumes in the same AZ to multiple EC2 instances. So you can't do that with IO2 volumes just yet. But it's on the roadmap.
Yep.
Yeah. So the use case for that is things like SAP HANA, things that need a lot of high performance disk access.
Yep. And of course, because it's cool, Amazon Bracket is now GA, which lets you do quantum computing. It's not something I know anything about, other than it sounds cool. And it's interesting that the actual service where Amazon offers quantum computing doesn't have quantum in the name.
Yeah, that is interesting. What does bracket refer to? Does anyone know?
I don't
know.
No.
Not me either. Wavelength in Boston and San Francisco, so it won't be. It'll be a long time before we get that in Australia, I suspect. Partly because of our carriers, or there's just no money in it. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen eventually, but that's where AWS have infrastructure in the mobile edge. So, but basically in the telecommunications providers' infrastructure in their 5G network hub, they put AWS infrastructure there. So if you're connecting through a 5G mobile, you can basically get extremely low latency access to AWS stuff over your phone. So yeah, if you're in Boston and San Francisco, happy days. If you're in Melbourne or Sydney or anywhere in Australia, you just have to be sad.
Yeah. It will come at some point.
It'll come eventually, one day.
Yeah. But I think we've reached the end of our time, and we'll soon be moving over to an actual talk.
Mm-hmm.
So just the usual plug. As Guy mentioned earlier, we also record a podcast about the news, and you can listen to that every month. And hopefully, I aim to have the next episode early the week after. Sometimes it's a little bit delayed because it takes time to edit. So thank you for that, and back to you, Rob.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Guy. Great look at the news as always. All right, so tonight we have our regular contributor, Dawn. We are very thankful for all the presentations Dawn has given us so far this year. We're looking forward to another good one tonight. Dawn, if you're able to share your screen.
One moment, please, as I
Yep,
try
no problem.
to work out how the technology actually works here. And realize that I'm not on my title slide. Never the greatest start. All right, are we working? Can you see a presentation?
Yes, I can. All right,
Most
I will throw it over
excellent.
to you.
Awesome. Hello,
Hang
everyone.
on a second. Sorry, I'll just switch this over.
Hello, everyone. I am glad to once again be back here at the Melbourne AWS user group from the comfort of your own homes. So far this year, I've looked at security, I've looked at governance, and now I'm going to look at one of the other big things that both centralized teams and the C-suite tend to care about, and that is cost management. So tonight, we are looking at FinOps 101, or affectionately known as how to stop your cloud workloads breaking the bank. So I'm fairly sure that most of the people here are probably sick of my introduction by now, but for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Dawn. I am an associate DevOps/SRE person at MYOB, and if I want to prove my own cost-saving credentials, I can dress for the opera for less than $5 if I have to. The most expensive part of that outfit was the stockings, which cost me $2.50. Outside of work, I am an occasional author and kitchen alchemist. Sometimes that ends well, sometimes it doesn't. I am also a raging sportsball fan, which is why that picture of me is me at Marvel Stadium. Now, in the tech world, we have an awful lot of buzzwords, and this friendly little hand-drawn bee here would like to remind you of some of the ones that we tend to run into. We've got things like the Internet of Things, big data, machine learning, and blockchain. We've got buzzwords that you would tend to see more from technical people, things like cloud native, test-driven development, or DevOps. So we've got all of these buzzwords, and FinOps basically just sounds like another buzzword. I mean, you've got DevOps and SecOps, so FinOps presumably just follows on from that, right? And why should we care? Well, FinOps isn't quite like DevOps or SecOps. It stands for financial operations, and what it's really about is the idea of trying to get more bang for your buck in the cloud. So it doesn't mean that we're throwing out all of our EC2 instances and changing them to T2 micros because that's cheaper. It's really about understanding why you're using the compute power that you're using and how you can make sure that you're using it as effectively as possible. And that can involve a lot of different things. It can involve working with teams to understand and manage their spend, because often if you have developers that don't have a huge amount of understanding of cloud computing, they might not even have looked at an AWS build before. All of the cloud providers, including AWS, do have their own cost management tools, which is another thing that you can leverage when you're looking at FinOps. And finally, if that doesn't cut it, you can use third-party tools with more advanced features if you really need to save more money. We will talk more about the cost-benefit trade-off there later. Now, when I came and talked here 2 months ago, we met the great people at the company ProductCorp. For those of you who didn't hear that talk, let's meet ProductCorp again. They're a startup with a head office in Sydney. They were founded approximately 5 years ago, and they offer 2 main products. They have a product called Buy It, which is basically inventory management software as a service. They also have Sell It, which is a managed online shopping platform, so something similar to Shopify. And most importantly, for our purposes tonight, all of ProductCorp's infrastructure runs on AWS. We have a few different people at ProductCorp that we need to meet. We've got Annie Jones, who is ProductCorp's current CFO, and she originally worked for an auditing firm. Now, as you would remember from our previous talk on Control Tower, Annie is primarily focused on value for money, and she's been watching with a bit of concern as ProductCorp's cloud spend has slowly been creeping up after their organizational restructure. And she wants to know, is this increased cloud spend benefiting the company at the moment? And if not, how can it? And in order to find that out, she is going to work with Ben Nguyen. They're ProductCorp's lead cloud engineer, and they have about 10 years of experience mainly working for startups. They're very passionate about improving infrastructure, and one of the things that they're hoping to be able to do with this is to, as well as get a better understanding and visibility into the amount of money that's being spent, to make sure that teams are spending that money efficiently and in a way that sort of advances the aims of the company and advances the quality of their software. So what's the problem? Well, if you saw my control tower talk that I gave a couple of months ago, you may remember that basically ProductCorp is aiming to move all of their products, buy it and sell it, from a monolith architecture to a microservices architecture. And as part of that, they've restructured their AWS accounts to move those into separate production accounts. They've also added a dev account per microservice that's being built, and a lab account per team, so that teams have somewhere to play around with things that they might want to do. That's been really good, and it's allowed them to resolve a lot of outstanding issues that they had. Unfortunately, since this happened, their cloud spend has increased by 400% month on month. And for a very small company, that is potentially unsustainable. So Annie wants to understand why the costs have increased, and she wants to make sure that their development teams have the support that they need to manage those costs in the future. So Annie and Ben sit down, discuss the problem, and they brainstorm some solutions. This is what they come up with. The first thing that they talk about is the idea that they need to go out and talk to each development team about how much their costs have increased, and they need to understand why that is. Because if you've suddenly got 10 or 15 times as many customers, and you're having to scale up all of your workloads for that, obviously that's a really good use of increased cloud spend. Whereas if you've got a bunch of resources that are running in lab accounts that nobody shut down after they've experimented, that's not such a good use of money. Then Ben makes Annie aware that they can use the provider dashboards to actually break down AWS costs and give teams some visibility into their usage. So as well as the central billing portal, they can encourage their developers to have a look at the billing for each account, which allows them to break down, okay, are we spending money efficiently? Do we understand what we're spending? And if we've got resources that we don't need, can we shut some of those down? Now, Ben's been around the startup ecosystem for a while, and one of the other things that they suggest to Annie is that they can work with AWS on strategies to understand and manage cloud spend. Now, ProductCorp, as they're scaling up, is just hitting that level where they're getting to needing enterprise support, and so they're going to look into bringing someone in to talk them through those kinds of things. And Annie, with her financial background, suggests that there might be a better way for them to visualize it. So for more specific use cases, she wants to investigate third-party tools and see whether there's anything there that will allow them to reduce their costs. Now, I don't know whether anyone or everyone who's listening to this talk today has ever actually seen an AWS spill. But for those of you who haven't, and prior to this, Annie hadn't, you're roughly looking at something that looks like this when you enter the AWS billing portal, which gives you a summary of the money that you're spending. If you're in your master billing account, gives you a summary of the money that you're spending across all of your accounts, and also gives you month-to-date spend by service. So you can compare it to how much you spent the previous month. You can compare it to how much you've spent in past months if you go and have a look at the Cost Explorer. And you can use the bill details under the month-to-date spend by service to break that down a little bit more and understand what each resource is actually costing you. When you get into Cost Explorer itself, it looks like this. And you can see that we've got a nice breakdown that explains, okay, this is what we've got going every month, and this is how our costs compare to what we had for the past 6 months. Now, here we're looking at EC2 instances, but you can actually change this up and you can see a cost breakdown for every single AWS service. I imagine that most people who work in cloud infrastructure or DevOps have probably actually seen these billing pages, but if you're a developer and you haven't, it's something that's worth looking into for the accounts that you work in to see whether you can get that data to actually get that better understanding then of how you would break it down. So Annie's had a look at ProductCorp's billing data, and then Annie and Ben are going to institute their plan. So they're going out to have some initial discussions with some of their development teams to find out why the cloud spend has increased. And they learn a few different things. the first thing that they learn is, as ProductCorp is moving to a microservices model, the teams are now running some of these microservices that they're currently building in production accounts alongside the old monoliths. And that's because it's not always efficient for them to remove services from the old monoliths as they're added to the microservices, as they're more focused on getting the whole migration done. There are also a lot of new resources in the new dev accounts. So teams are going in there, they're setting up development environments, they're setting up testing environments, and they're really making sure that they're getting full use of this resource. The thing with that, though, is that ProductCorp, like many other companies, mostly works 9 to 5. They don't have offices in any other country, and so they've got these resources that are running out of hours when they don't need to be, because no one's going to use a development environment at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And the teams are making use of their lab accounts to spike out new things that they want to do and understand how best to translate their old architecture over to a microservices architecture. The thing with that, though, is that when they're done, they're not actually deleting their experiments. So quite a bit of this increased cloud spend is from things that people have done that are still sitting there and quietly running in lab accounts, costing them a few $1,000s a month. Now, the first thing that you would talk about when you want to talk about FinOps is the idea of paying up front for things. And Annie and Ben have previously made use of reserved instances, which allow you to pay up front for EC2 instances that you'll know you're going to use. So they've already paid for the EC2 instances that buy it and sell it are using. And they've taken out a reserved instance plan for some of the new instances that they anticipate that their microservices are going to use. Now, you can buy reserved instances on 1 year or 3 year terms. So previously, they had renewed their old instances for a year's term. And now that they're moving to microservices and they know that what they're doing is not going to change a lot, they're looking to translate sort of their reserved instances for the new microservices. They want to do that on 3 year plans. And there are a couple of different ways that they can do that. So Standard RIs, which is what they were using for their old monolith products, offer you a steeper discount, up to about 72%, but they're less flexible. If AWS reduces the price of the instances that you're using, you don't benefit from that when you've taken out a standard reserved instance plan. The other thing that they do is they lock you into a particular instance family. So when new, more efficient instances are released, or if you wanted to switch from different types of instances, we'll explain that in a minute, then you would have to go away and buy new reserved instance plans, and that means that you're wasting the ones that you've got. So what Annie and Ben have done for the new ProductCorp microservice instances is they've bought convertible reserved instances, which, while they save ProductCorp less money up front, are much more flexible, because it means that if a new generation of machines comes out and it's going to be overall cheaper for them, then they can move over to that. One thing, however, that Annie and Ben hadn't looked at was savings plans. And the reason why they want to take out some savings plans now is because savings plans don't just cover EC2, they cover Fargate and Lambda as well. And some of these new microservices are going to be run on Fargate. So the idea with savings plans is that you're not buying instances so much as you're buying compute power in advance. So you're saying to AWS, okay, I'm going to use X dollars worth of compute power every hour, and you're going to give me a discount of X% on that. And you can get two different types of savings plans. You can get savings plans that are just for EC2 compute per hour, and you can get savings plans that are for all compute per hour, which also include Lambda and Fargate. They cover EC2 usage as well, so if you want flexibility, that's the way to go. So Annie and Ben take a look through the AWS pricing guide, and they decide that they're going to purchase some savings plans for their Fargate and their Lambda. But it's very, very complex, and they're going to take my advice down here, which is that if you have an accountant, you should get them to look at it for you to work out what the best cost-benefit ratio is, because compute per hour tends to fluctuate quite a lot, and you have to have a pretty good understanding of the money to know how much you want to buy. The next thing that Annie and Ben are going to do is to look for wins, and obviously they're going to start by picking off the low-hanging fruit and trying to find the quick wins. But once they've got through that, some of the wins that they're going to look at are not going to be quite so quick. So they do engage AWS Enterprise support, and their new account team produces a cost report for them. Now, that cost report contains recommendations about things that they can do to save money. Basically, it's targeted to assist them with managing their costs. And that talks about RIs and savings plans, but it also talks about a number of other things, like shutting down inactive resources when they're not running. It talks about spot instances, and it talks about right-sizing. And he doesn't understand that, so Ben is going to take her through the explanation as they try to improve things. One thing that Ben identifies really quickly is that ProductCorp can use spot instances for their CI/CD agents. Spot instances are basically spare compute capacity that's available in AWS data centers, and they're up to 90% cheaper than on-demand instances. The disadvantage of this is that if the data center needs that compute power for on-demand instances, then your spot instance can pretty much just be shut down. So the way that this works is you set the price. You say, I want to buy a spot instance for X cents per hour, this type of instance, and as long as there is compute capacity available in the AWS data centers, and there aren't people who are sort of bidding higher than you for spot instances, then you will be able to run your spot instances for as long as you want, as long as AWS doesn't need that capacity. And the reason why Ben thinks that this is the way they should go for their CI/CD agents is that spot instances are really useful for workloads that don't need to run constantly. Because for a CI/CD job, that agent might only last 10 to 20 minutes before you're spinning it down. And at that point, you don't necessarily want to be paying the full price of an on-demand instance. So Ben converts all of their CI/CD agents over to spot instances. And then they start to look at the recommendations on right-sizing. And right-sizing is basically about decreasing the size of instances that have more compute power than they need. So if you've got an M5X large that's running at 2%, you probably don't need an instance that big, and you can potentially scale it down. Another thing that you can kind of look at in terms of right-sizing is upgrading to newer instance families, which are more efficient. So you might upgrade from an M4 to an M5, and you might find that because those newer instances are more efficient, overall it actually saves you money. The other thing that's worth calling out though, and it's something that's going to be very important to ProductCorp as they migrate over to microservices, is that you want to use the appropriate type of instance for your workload. Because you've got general purpose instances, which is basically what ProductCorp was using for everything before. But now they're looking at using things like compute optimized, memory optimized, and storage optimized instances. They have some instances that are going to sit around for a long time and just have lots of information in them. Then they want to use storage optimized instances for those, which will generally save them a bit of money because they're not paying for that compute power. Whereas if they've got instances that don't really need to store anything but are doing a huge amount of computation, like say, an instance that's taking events from one place and shifting it over to another, although there are probably better ways to do that, you'd want to look at something more like a compute optimized instance. There are also accelerated computing instances, which are designed for, I guess you could call it processing heavy workloads. So if you were doing things like building a machine learning model, or you were doing data analysis, or say video rendering, then those accelerated computing instances will allow you to do that much quicker and much more efficiently and potentially much cheaper than the general purpose instances or any of the optimized instances would. The last thing that Annie and Ben are going to look at here is hibernation and cleanup of resources that don't need to be running out of hours. So what they want to do is all of these development workloads that their teams are now setting up to test with, they want to shut those down at about 6 o'clock every day and then restart them again at 6 o'clock in the morning. And they're going to do that using CI/CD pipelines. So they automate a job that just stops all of their instances at 6 o'clock and then restarts it at 6 o'clock the next morning. Now, the resources in the lab account should be cleaned up regularly because you generally wouldn't want to have experiments that go too much longer than a couple of weeks. So as well as getting their developers and their engineers to go in and clean up those manually on a regular basis, Ben suggests that they should leverage Service Catalog to create lifecycle policies for all of the resources in their lab accounts. Now, those can be overwritten so that if you need something to stick around for 4 or 6 weeks while you're running a longer experiment, you can do it. But if you don't, then you don't have to worry about remembering to clean things up because it will be shut down for you. One other thing that's kind of useful to call out here is that Sometimes high cloud spend can be because your software is really poorly designed. And without saying too much, I've definitely run across more than one instance of this in the wild myself. The thing is, though, that the cost-benefit analysis of software redesign can be really difficult because you're going to put in a huge amount of development and engineering time up front to save a lot of money down the line. And there are a couple of things with that. The first one is that tech debt is never good, and letting tech debt accumulate leads to things like what ProductCorp is having to do now. But the other thing with that is that you can kind of consider, as ProductCorp is doing, going through that redesign in phases. So they're not sitting down and saying, we're going to pull the whole thing out into microservices and only then will we put it on AWS. They're saying, okay, we're going to take out one microservice at a time, make sure that those are functioning. So that means that potentially if you have to stop halfway through for more urgent work, at least you're still getting some of the benefit. And once Ben and Annie are done with that, they've managed to clean up quite a few things. But Annie is still interested to see whether there are any other things that they can do to improve it. So they're going to go and look then at some third-party tools. And there are a couple of different types of those. So the first one is third-party cost dashboards, and that's tools such as the ones that are listed here. Sometimes those tools will come bundled as part of complete cloud governance solutions. So you might get a piece of software that also manages, say, your ISO audits or your risk compliance, but it will come with a more advanced cost dashboard built into it. And generally, the value for money proposition of these is that they provide you with more extensive visibility than the AWS billing portal and the Cost Explorer do. Sometimes they themselves will provide cost-saving recommendations. Sometimes they'll just surface that information in a way that's easier for you to understand. And they have very, very different pricing models. Some of them are flat. Some of them are based on the number of accounts that you put in. For some of them, the pricing is based on your actual cloud spend. And some of those are going to be more or less economical depending on the size of your company. The other selling point for these, which is one of the reasons why Annie was interested in them, is that some of those vendors are multi-cloud. So if you need to have workloads running across AWS, Azure, and GCP, potentially some of those vendors will allow you to see all of your cost information in one place, which gives you much more visibility. The trick with these, though, is that unless they're going to take their costs as a proportion of what you save by using them, you need to make sure that you're saving more money than you pay. You can find that you sort of have some of these third-party vendors which will say to you, you can save X amount of money and we're going to charge you, 20% of X, but you can't actually save X amount of money unless you've also got 4 full-time engineers working on it, which is not really ideal. So again, if you've got your accountant, that's the time to sit down and do a cost-benefit analysis. So Annie looks at the cost dashboards and decides that that's not a way that she wants to go, which finally brings her to some specialist tools. And these are generally things that deal with specific environments or use cases. So they might deal with things like cost optimization specifically for Kubernetes. Spot.io leverages Spot instance to reduce the cost of your EC2 workloads. Some of them will actually bill themselves as going in and implementing cost savings automatically by doing the Rightsizing for you. I've never tried those out in the wild. I would be very curious to see whether they live up to that. And ProductCorp has done this, but the thing that you really want to do if you end up using any of these specialist tools is to make sure that you cover the basics first. So if you haven't had a discussion about let's shut down our dev environment out of hours, or if you haven't had those discussions about right-sizing, the specialist tools are not necessarily going to be hugely important or useful for you. I mean, you can't necessarily implement some of their recommendations or use them well unless you've really got yourself to a baseline. And some of those specialist tools do actually require you to architect around them. So from that, Annie and Ben have been through their environments. They sit down at the end of it, and at the end of it, they discover that far from the 400% increase that they had month on month, they were now looking at their cost spent, their cloud costs being fairly steady, and only about double what they were looking at when they were running everything in one account. And for the increased amount of customers that they're getting, that's fairly acceptable to them. So it's time for questions. Once again, the folks at AWS have got in contact with me, and they have asked me to provide you with a QR code if you are interested in getting in contact with them. Perhaps if you wanted to look at the recommendations that your solutions architects and technical account managers provide, or maybe if you wanted to discuss how that enterprise support can benefit you in terms of financial visibility, then feel free to use that QR code. Otherwise, thank you for having me once again, and I hope that you learned something.
Sorry, I was still muted. Thanks, Dawn. That was a wonderful presentation again.
Thank you for having me.
I don't see a lot of questions yet. We had one so far, and I'm not entirely certain how serious Jonathan Parker was about this, but the question is, do savings plans cover net gateways?
I'll let the laughter as a response stand for that one.
Yeah.
To be honest, I've never tried, but I think the answer to that is probably not.
I believe you are correct. Yep. John, another question from Jonathan. Are there any tools for running spot, reserved, or savings plans on Fargate or EKS for baseload and Lambda for burst? That's a very long question.
It is, and look, to be honest, there's probably someone somewhere that's built something that will allow you to do it. The first thing is that my comment about going for the quick wins and making sure that you've got the basics down still stands, because there's no point in architecting a solution like that or bringing in a solution like that if you're not shutting down your dev environments at 2 a.m. And my second comment to that, I guess, would be I'm not aware of anything, but I'm sure that if you've come up with that idea, then there's probably a market for it somewhere. So if no one's done it yet, then maybe that's a startup idea for someone.
Yeah. In addition to that, I would add, when it comes to Fargate, it's the only option there you have is the savings plan, and that gets automatically used. So that's convenient.
Yes.
And
my understanding of the question was that it was talking about a solution that would allow you to apply savings plans to Fargate and Lambda and spot instances for EC2 and basically take whatever was the cheapest for compute capacity. But I may have misunderstood that.
Yeah, I am not entirely sure. I could have also misunderstood it. So did any other questions crop up in the meantime? There's one more. Okay. From Priyanka. I am a data analyst and have started preparing for the Solution Architect Associate exam. My question is, do companies entertain people who are certified but have no professional experience on AWS?
I think
Yeah,
I'm not sure how related that is to what I'm talking about. I think that's probably one for the Slack or for the catch up afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I think that's it then.
Thank you for having me again.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, hopefully I can wait a few more months before I come up with my next wild idea this time.
Well,
thank you very much, Dawn. Thank you, Ian. Another great talk. I really love the way that your talks always focus on stories. They're very entertaining and very easy to follow. So second up tonight, we have a presentation that Anshu has sent through for us. It's actually a very short one. It's only a 5-minute lightning talk, but hopefully it's just as informative. Please post your questions early in the chat or on Slack if you have them. It doesn't go for very long, so yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Anshu Sharma and I'm a solutions architect. Today I'm going to talk about Amazon Interactive Video Service. Amazon IVS is a managed service which can be used to build interactive live streaming experiences. I will also demonstrate how I used IVS to build one. But before that, let me show you a slide which talks about latency. As you can see on the leftmost side, we have the legacy latency range. This is where most of the over-the-top streaming solutions like Netflix, Amazon Prime exist. You have around 20 to 45 seconds of latency. And on the rightmost side, you have solutions which require sub-second latency, like two-way chatting platform or video conferencing solutions. In the middle, you have low latency range, and this is where your typical broadcast latency exists. Solutions which deliver live sports to you usually exist in that area. The segment size is usually very small, like 1 second or 2 second segment. And the latency is around 4 to 10 seconds. Between this and sub-second, we have the ultra low latency range, also known as ULL. The solutions like live auctions, interactive gaming applications, interactive shopping exist in that area because they require low latency. So as you can see, low latency is core requirement for interactivity. And this is where IVS exists. Let me give you a demo of it. You can see a Postman window on my screen. The Postman is a tool to send API requests to API endpoints. I'm using IVS endpoint in US West 2, and I'm using create channel. The name is set as IVS channel UG, and that's all we need to create a channel. So let's send it. As you can see, after I press send, I got the channel ARN, which is Amazon resource name, the ingest endpoint, which we'll use to send the stream, and also a playback URL, which we will use to play our stream. There is also a stream key at the bottom of that output, which is required to send your stream to the ingest endpoint. Now, let me show you the actual demo. This is my OBS screen. OBS is a software which you can use to stream. Click on settings. We go to stream. We put the ingest URL there. And also the stream key so that we can finally stream. Let's go to the output. I've already changed the keyframe interval to 2, which is required for ultra low latency. And also 0 latency is required at that field. Let's click on OK and we're ready to stream. So start streaming. And we are live now. You can see on the bottom right that it's a green icon at 30 FPS and we are live from 7-8 seconds. The clock there shows the time at the stream. This is my browser window and I'm opening the browser page which will show you the stream. Let me press enter. And there we go. We got the stream now. And you can see the current time on the top left corner and the time shown in the stream. And you can see there is around 2 to 3 second delay, which is ultra low latency range. This is the demo for ultra low latency. The OBS clock is also shown there if you want to compare. You can use this URL right now, and I'm also streaming a clock there right now to see it in action. Let me show you how I use metadata. Again, back to my Postman window. I'm using put metadata endpoint this time. Everything else is same. I'm using channel ARN to send my metadata. And in the metadata, I have a question. What is S3? And there are possible answers, object storage, different answers like Kubernetes, and then the correct answer is mentioned as index at 0, which is the object storage. I've sent it. And here at the live stream, you saw the question. It's there. If you click on the wrong one, it will flash red, and you can capture this back. Let me send it again so I can answer the right answer. And there you go. This time I'm going to click on object storage. You can see it flashing green. And you can also see it's ultra low latency, 2 to 3 seconds delay. So this is the demo of how you can use ultra low latency stream to create an engaging experience for your audiences. The stream right now is already up. If you want to have a go, you can see the ultra low latency stream and the delay which is there. Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Thank you very much, Anshu. That was awesome. Let's just see if we have any questions asked in the stream. Don't forget, ask them in YouTube. Nothing yet. Put a reminder up. I had a few questions for that.
Sure.
So how reliable, so your demo stream there had 2 to 3 milliseconds delay. Is that pretty consistent generally? Like, are there any guarantees or averages around that?
Of course. So where we're operating it's a ultra low latency range. So you see 3 to 5, but obviously factors like your network speed, your equipment, your what kind of streaming software you're using will have an impact. So we do provide the settings which you can use for something like OBS, but obviously those factors are external and they will definitely have an impact.
Yeah, I can see I've got 2 copies of this live stream running right now, and we use just standard YouTube low latency stuff, and 1 copy my iPad gets 5 seconds and the web browser gets 15 to 20 seconds. So definitely there's some work that could be done to improve that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Are there any, so when it actually comes to using or deploying this sort of thing, is this solution designed to mostly use inside a product, like for someone to develop a product around, or is it something that you could plug into third-party tools? Or
so this is pretty flexible. So the IBS is done in a way that you can create the channel and start events. You can actually use the API and write something which helps that API creates the channel for you, and straight away you're streaming. So you can bake that in your code, in your software. And some customers are starting to build a SaaS solution where they're offering it in a multi-tenant way. So that is also a customer use case.
Oh, cool. Definitely something that's widely useful this sort of year. Everybody's trying to tackle interactivity all at the same time now. We have one way of doing it here by myself coming on, or Ian coming on to ask questions, but certainly something that allows people to interact more directly would be awesome.
Yeah, this offers more like a sit forward experience instead of sit back experience you have while watching the TV on the sofa. So you sit forward, you are interacting with the video almost in a frame accurate way.
Yep. I remember when the quiz show HQ or whatever it was that was popular a year or 2 ago was pretty much this sort of thing. It was actually really interesting to see. I can't imagine how they did it 2 years ago without this sort of tool available to them, but yeah. All right, so it doesn't look like we've had any other questions come in. Will you be around in Slack and on the chat for the next half an hour or 2?
Absolutely, I'm there to answer questions and help as much as I can.
Great, so if you do have any questions for Anshu, please feel free to ask in the chat or on Slack. All right,
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so our last presenter for the night, our brand new hero, Peter, has joined us to talk, what was it? Client VPN, that's right. So, I've lost my notes. That's all right. So it's Client VPN using Control Tower. I'll switch over to Peter now. Hello, me again. Few technical difficulties, just waiting for screen sharing to work properly. all of the practice and preparation in the world, and things still go wrong with screen sharing on the night.
Hey, Finley, are you still in there?
One second. Sorry, folks. I will be with you in a second.
Right, always happens. Especially when we're forced to use something like Skype to screen share. Not the most modern tool, but unfortunately it does provide the best integration for OBS in this sort of broadcast.
Yes, certainly. Look, I might have it up now. Do you want to give that a whirl?
I can see that. I'll switch it over to you now.
And is that presenting properly? Awesome. Okay, welcome. Thanks for sticking around tonight. My name's Peter Hansons of Cloud Shuttle. I'm going to be taking you through AWS Client VPN, and I do apologize about the technical details earlier. I'm a newly appointed AWS serverless hero, but it doesn't make me a live streaming expert, unfortunately, nor a Skype expert. A bit about who I am. So I do a lot of community work. I run the data engineering and serverless meetups here in Sydney. I'm presenting here from Sydney. I also recently ran Data Eng Bytes, a community data engineering conference last week, and that was really good fun. Last year I also ran Serverless Days Sydney. I ran AWS Serverless Community Day, and also next week I'm going to be running Serverless Days ANZ. So way too many conferences. Talk to me after this about how the heck I even find the time to do all of it when I've got 2 kids and stuff. But anyway, enough about that. So I'm the founder of Cloud Shuttle, a community-focused cloud consultancy. I've got 7 AWS certifications, always keen to do more. And just thought I'd repeat it, like I just recently got this gong of AWS Serverless Hero, which I'm super proud about. So that's really awesome. So what am I going to talk about tonight? Basically, I just kind of want to give you an easy introduction about sort of client VPN and really set the scene. So I'm going to go through what, AWS accounts versus organizations, why you might want one, what is a control tower, and a bit of a segue to AWS single sign-on, and then how you can access workloads in AWS, IAM versus VPC accessibility, the need for a VPN. Then I'm going to take you through what is AWS Client VPN, and then do a little demo. Cool. So without further ado, just thought I'd set the scene. Imagine you're at a startup or a company taking their first steps in the cloud. You might be an expert at AWS, but this company is just trying to get into the cloud. So what you might do is you might set up your first account and get some workloads onto the cloud, whether it be a serverless solution using Lambda or a container on ECS, or maybe a more traditional approach with a virtual machine on EC2. So you've just got a couple of workloads there and everything's going well, so you decide to migrate a few more things across. And as you do that, and you might hire a few more developers or bring them into the team, you might want to sort of get a bit more guarantee around, those workloads and things. So you decide, okay, let's add a production account and, tighten the permissions a little bit so that you're not allowing open slather to occur in that environment, because potentially you've got some mission critical workloads happening. So you've got that now, and then you add a few more developers and maybe want to sort of get a bit more process around how you move code between the environments. So you might add a staging environment, and then you might add a shared account where you've got, where you host things like your CI/CD pipelines and code and container repositories. And you might go ahead and use, say, Git flow in order to sort of promote your code through the various environments. So, you might have all your infrastructure as code templated out in CloudFormation, or potentially one of the other tools like Terraform and the like, and you're keeping a fairly sort of similar copy between the environments, changing a few parameters depending on whether it's a prod workload or not. Cool. So, you've got this wonderful setup now. It's the code's all flowing nice and smoothly. But then, your company has become so successful by leveraging the cloud and all the wonderful benefits that AWS brings you, that you're attracting regulatory attention or something like that. And you just need to have a bit more guarantees around what your accounts actually look like. And I guess, say, for instance, you might want to know, have some sort of alerting about, whether you've got a security group that's got SSH open to the world. So this is a bit what Control Tower brings you. It gives you a set of accounts. So how you'll create Control Tower, you'll create a master account, which will then roll out Control Tower, which will come with a core organizational unit and have audit and logging accounts. And then you'll probably, then you can use the account vetting machine, create a operational organizational unit if that's kind of how you'd like to structure things. And then you'll have, perhaps a shared account with a dev, staging and prod, or, I've seen much more complicated account structures. But yeah, so basically this is kind of what you can do with Control Tower. And I'll take you through a little bit what the features are of Control Tower that sort of help you out to, I guess, structure things and get a few more guarantees around what your account and your security posture look like. Cool. What is that doing? Awesome. So that's not really, sorry, folks, 1 second. Let me just exit. I'll just refresh this. I lost my images for a second. Hopefully they come back. Cool. Awesome. So what is Control Tower? So it's the next incarnation of landing zones. You might have played around with landing zones a bit if you're a bit of a DevOps type. And, it was a bit cumbersome. It was relying on step functions that didn't always work seamlessly. And Control Tower is now just, that click of a button service that just works. And so AWS have taken a lot of the heavy lifting away from you in terms of rolling out a AWS organization setup. And so it comes with a account vending machine, and it's a best practice setup with guardrails and governance a bit around, what your AWS organizations looks like. It comes with a VPC. My personal preference is to, bring my own VPC to it. I just think, the one that it comes with it out of the box isn't my particular cup of tea. Perhaps we can feed that into the teams and get them to update it. But I think you might be interested in doing that yourself. So get yourself a nice little CloudFormation template to roll out a VPC with all the bells and whistles. Cool. So it also comes with AWS SSO, and AWS SSO is a centralized place to log into all of your accounts. And the good thing about this is that there's no IAM users required, and you can manage your permissions centrally. Just going back a few slides, imagine you've got this many accounts, and you've got, you needed to create IAM users for all of these different accounts. And manage them in all of the different accounts. It can be quite a job, and can be quite cumbersome to make sure that you've got all of these IAM users and the right roles that that they've got, and the permissions and stuff. Or sometimes a lot of organization setups, they'll have a centralized identity account, so you've got all your IAM users in that centralized identity account, assuming roles into all of these other different accounts, and you need to manage all of those relationships and stuff like that. So AWS SSO takes away a lot of the heavy lifting around that, and also allows you to group users into different permission buckets and assign, say, a read-only role or something like that to particular users. So this is a bit of a view of how an AWS SSO looks like. You've got the portal to log in. It's a single place to log in and get access to all of your accounts, and you can specify different roles with which to access accounts. So if you look, I can jump into my prod account, and I've done a bit of a faux pas here by not having a read-only role assigned to me. But anyway, I'll have to fix that up later. But yeah, this is kind of a bit of a view. You've got your dev, shared, staging, production accounts, and various other accounts. So that's a pretty good segue into what AWS Client VPN does for you, because I guess AWS SSO allows this centralized place to access everything from an IAM perspective. But how about the accessibility of VPC-based workloads? So that's basically the job of Client VPN. And of course, you can use other VPNs if you really will, but I guess Client VPN just takes all of the management overhead away from you, so that you can just basically configure your Client VPN and allow access to all your various users. Configuring a Client VPN isn't exactly a walk in the park, but there's some pretty good resources that I'll share with you at the end of this tutorial, or this presentation, that'll take you through it. So yeah, this diagram probably takes you through some good stuff in terms of the associating subnets and stuff like that. So first of all, I just wanted to give you a bit of a grounding of an AWS VPC. I guess what you'd typically set up in a production setting. You'll have, a 3-tier VPC across, say, 3 availability zones if you're deploying in Sydney. And so you've got a bit of high availability. You've got public, private, and secure subnets. If you've got a, web application, you might have a load balance in your public tier, an application server in your private tier, and a database in your secure subnet. And, because you've got, say, PII, or all your mission critical data in your Amazon RDS database, you don't want that open up to the world, and you probably block all access from your public subnet through to your secure subnet. So the only way to actually get to that data in the database or to query it is to somehow get into this private subnet and then access it that way. So that's a little bit what we're trying to achieve with the Client VPN. So this is kind of a bit of an overview of a control tower setup. So you've got, like I mentioned previously, you've got your organization master account. and then you've got your core organization unit with your log account and your audit account with a bunch of various different services like guard duty and things like that. You've got your SO set up in your master account, and then you've got your shared account, and then your operational accounts of dev staging and production. And you'll have VPCs across all of those different accounts, and obviously very similar VPCs, or if not exactly the same. And you'll have a VPC in your shared account, and you'll need to set up some peering between all of those VPCs. And in your shared account, what you'll want to do is set up your Amazon client VPN. And that'll allow, say, if you've got some build tools that need to deploy things, via VPC-based workloads, you can do that way. Cool. So how do you set up a client VPN? If you're using the mutual authentication method, you'll need to get some OpenSSL EasyRSA certificates. You'll need to set up some authorizations, subnet associations, and then you'll need your routes, say to your dev private subnet, for instance. So I pre-recorded a video. The sound I don't think comes through. So this is just me I've deployed a Postgres database in Aurora, and I've got Secrets Manager there with a database credential. And then I've just done a reverse search, and using pSQL, I'm trying to access this database locally. This database is hosted, as you can see, in my dev account. So I'm traversing via my shared account through to my dev account. And I haven't connected via my client VPN yet. And so, trying to connect to this RDS database, it's just not going to work. And then I click connect on my client VPN and wait for it to connect, and then try it again. And then I'm able to grab that password, I'm able to connect, and I run a query. I've got nothing in there because I didn't put anything in that Postgres database. But yeah, that's kind of it. So don't worry about copying any of those secrets or anything like that. I've blown that database away, so you're not going to be able to steal any of those empty tables. So effectively, yeah, that's kind of the whole flow of it. And just need to, it's replaying the video, so yeah, won't go through that again. Okay, so here's some useful links, like a Medium article about sort of how to configure certificates for different users. There's a nice little YouTube of taking you through the whole setup, and obviously it's always good to reference the docs at AWS when getting started. So here's some of my contact details, peter@cloudshuttle.com.au if you want to reach out to me. I've got my website there, and at Peter Hansons on Twitter. So feel free to send through any sort of questions that you've got. But yeah, thanks for having me, and happy to take any questions you might have.
Hey Peter, thanks for that. I think I'm unmuted. Yes, I look like I'm unmuted. That's good. Second time tonight I've managed that. We do have a couple of questions that have come through for you.
Cool.
So Jonathan Parker asks, any reason why SSM port forwarding can't replace client VPN?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, obviously now AWS is just making it super easy to access workloads using sort of IAM-based methods via SSM. So that totally works. I guess, in some respects, when you just want to quickly dev something out on your local, so whatever's kind of easiest for you. So, yeah, VPNs are...
take on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes the port forwarding might work well, but I know how easy it is as a dev, or how much better it is to have access to stuff without having to set up port forwards and everything else when you need it to.
Yeah.
I had a question as well, and if anybody else wants to ask a question, now is the time. Don't forget, you can ask in YouTube or in Slack. I haven't actually used Client VPN, to be honest. I still have a bunch of OpenVPN servers running on some T2 micros that I spin up when I need to, that sort of stuff. How would the experience compare with setting that up with Client VPN?
I think, so usually when you're setting up OpenVPN, you're probably baking images and doing lots of stuff like that. So that's completely taken away from you. I would imagine configuring users might be a little bit easier in OpenVPN than it is in Client VPN. I think Client VPN does link in well with, 80 and all that sort of jazz. So it's the certificate creation, the user creation on Client VPN on just a pretty simple setup. Also pricing, I feel like Client VPN, but can get a little bit steep sometimes, but I think it's that typical thing, it's kind of serverless, it's taking the management overhead.
Yep.
So and I'm sure they're going to go through a few more iterations to make the user experience even better. So yeah, I'd be on the fence on that one, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I guess it's the same as everything. Quite often, if you roll it yourself and take on the management overhead yourself, you can save a bit of money, but is that worth it? It might not be for everybody.
That's exactly it. You need to compare, what you pay per hour to how much your time's worth, and I think, that's probably where Client VPN does come in super handy.
We had one other question, only sort of related to Client VPN, but related to SSO.
Yep.
Matt Bayless asked, how well does SSO work with CLI access and assuming roles?
Oh, I forgot to add that link. Another AWS serverless hero, actually, Ben Kehoe of iRobot, he's created a really cool repo that sort of helps you set up the AWS SSO CLI based access a lot easier. So I might drop that in the chat somewhere or on the YouTube channel, but that's definitely, so once you've got that, it's a total breeze. But
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool, that was all the questions that we had here. If you could drop that link in Slack or in the chat afterwards, that would be awesome.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Thanks very much, Peter, and congratulations again on your new shiny Cape of Honor. Hopefully we get to see you wearing it at all the events from now on.
Absolutely. And apologies for the technical details. I'll figure out Skype one of these days.
Or they'll add NDI support to Zoom, hopefully, and we can move off Skype. But yeah, not keeping my fingers crossed for that one. Thanks very much, Peter. Will you be around afterwards in the chat?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump on now.
Great. Thanks very much. Well, which way am I going? This way. So that's it for tonight. We're exactly on time. That's awesome. Bring up our closing slides. So our next event, which again will be online, we're anticipating that we will probably be online for the rest of 2020 at least. I don't know. We'll look and wait until we get out of stage 4, probably until we get out of stage 3. Definitely, I don't anticipate that being anytime soon, but we will probably look to make a decision around going back to physical meetups after discussion with our sponsors and with our venues, assuming we can still get a venue, when we start to talk about stage 1 again. like that's when we'll probably start considering what our next move is. Until then, we'll be back again on YouTube on the 29th of September. Same time, same place. Or you might be in a different place, but we'll be in the same place. Thanks again to our sponsors, Enabler, AC3, CMD, and Do It International for their support this year. And we have a post-stream Zoom catch-up, just a small social event. We call it the virtual pub, as a lot of meetups do. If you want to join in on that, the link will be posted in Slack. And just once again, to join Slack, it's melb.awsug.org.au/Slack. And that's it. We'll see you on Zoom if you want to join on Zoom. Thank you very much for your attendance tonight. We'll see you again next month.